Hey, peace and blessings, everybody. It's your brother, Sorry. Back with yet another one. I mean, excuse me. Peace to the ancestors. Yeah, I mean, as always, let's try to feed that energy. Yeah, I mean, uh, always remember those who came before us for all their contributions, because as we can see, as we've talked about previously on the video on ancestral veneration, we are we're linked to them in various ways. Um, and that's a whole feedback loop in itself or whatever. So just want to always honor them. Um, and also, man, honoring the true and living, man. Who's the true and living? If y'all been tuned in, locked in to any of these videos, man, peace and blessings to you. Peace to the gods, man. Peace to the true and living. You know what I mean? Oh, man, y'all, excuse me. Y'all know I always got to plug up, man. Plug in the juice. The juice is loose. So, yeah. So on this one, in our efforts to hold down this section of the internet, as we always do, I present to you the latest issue of Ether Illustrated, the Bio-Aetheric engineering of homicide. So when we talk about this, the Bio-Aetheric engineering of homicide, this is going to go into um, the video that we did about necromancy. This is going to tie into the video we did about the Bardo states, death in the Bardo states. This is going to tie into the video we did about ancestral veneration. This is going to tie into the video that I'm not sure if it's come out yet, but a video about kemet as a resonant circuit. So we see how these things operate from a societal level and everything like that. Um, you know, these conversations we have because, like I said in the previous video, I mean, I know people who do astrology. When we read certain people charts, we see certain stuff in people charts. Be like, hey man, I see what this is, what you got going on here. Look like you had this, that, and the third going on in the past or whatever. Whatever this is, I really don't want to know. I don't want to know the details of the situation. I just know what certain things look like when I see them. Um, but yeah, this is the thing. I know this is in today's society, evil has been glorified. Negativity has been made to be fair seeming and stuff like that. Life is cheap nowadays, whatever case may be. There's a whole culture. They've geared my young guys into this whole thing about your drill rap and your whole little thing like that or whatever case may be. They've taken the warrior mentality of my young guys and corrupted it into um, us turning that on ourselves or whatever and causing harm to ourselves or whatever. So we're going to explore that. You see what I'm saying? From a bioetheric engineering perspective. You see, what does this mean? What does this entail or what have you? Um, and how does it bleed into some of the other stuff that we did? Um, okay, when we talked about on the previous video, we were exploring multi-deity systems like Palomeombe and everything like that. And we were dealing with the idea of necromancy, a, as we're going to see, homicide is very similar to the idea of necromancy. Now, people lump necromancy into, the black magic category. You see what I'm saying? Your auguries in India do that as well. So, Apollo is not the only tradition that has necromancy involved, and that's a global thing, or whatever case may be, ancient and modern and everything like that. But that was just the tradition that we were just kind of doing a case study on. The whole homicide thing is just like how in the video about the cauldron and the deceased person, there's a residual energy field after the original human biofield, which is the medical terminology for the aura. You see what I'm saying? Human biofield decouples from the battery or the body and everything like that. There's a residual energy field that lingers for a short period of time. And from the perspective, like we were doing a case study on Paulo, there's a ritualistic disturbance of the um, death process that binds this deceased person to the cauldron in order to do service for the palero. You won't this ain't a how to or nothing like that. You go find your palero in there and go through whatever they're gonna take you through. And if that's your bag, this is for informational purposes only. This is kind of to analyze what's going on when these things happen. Okay, so the binding of the individual through trauma it binds the person doing the crime and the victim of the crime together and stuff like that. That's why when you talk to people in the military who've unalived people and stuff like that on duty or whatever case may be, they see the faces of the people they unalive. Like we talked about in the example of Paulo in the necromancy example, if that individual does not do everything that's ritualistically prescribed to them, and again, a palero will have to give you the nuances of it. You see what I'm saying? This ain't designed as a how-to, but if that person doesn't do everything ritualistically prescribed to them in that process or whatever, they could create a situation where the deceased person tries to do them harm. You see what I'm saying? So when you remember in the video, go back to the video where we talk about antinomian kinetics and sexual polarity and everything like that. Basically, we talked about the difference between left hand path and antinomian kinetics is left hand path. They do heterodox practices and everything like that, but it's ritually structured. It's ritually structured with the negative karma in mind. So it's the body is conditioned to be able to facilitate these high risk, high reward type of exercises and stuff like that, these shocks to the system or whatever. As opposed to the antinomian way, there's no um um I don't know, system in place to facilitate this or whatever. So this homicide, what we talking about, this is more of an antinomian type of thing. Is bleeding into the same thing that we talking about when we was getting into the bioetheric engineering of necromancy or whatever. You're doing some sort of act that binds you traumatically to this other individual and everything like that, and it basically opens it up to a situation where this person can torment your life. Basically, it's basically a way of I don't know, creating uh, again, other people who deal with other systems of necromancy, they may be able to add a little bit more color to this discussion or whatever. But basically, from what I get from it, from the perspective that I'm coming from, it's basically a way to get somebody to haunt you, basically, because you're responsible for them not being here anymore. And depending on how traumatic that instance was or whatever case may be, that person is bound to you or whatever in a negative type of way. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, and due to the fact that remember how we talk about coercion and everything like that, you did something to them against their will or whatever. So it's a negative blowback that comes back from that or whatever case may be. In a video that we just did, we were talking about legislative and judicial priesthood and everything like that, and how positive law, which is man's law, comes out of natural law. So positive law is it's man's attempt at this feedback loop. When you do something bad, something, there's retribution and stuff like that. It's man's artificial karmic system and stuff like that. So that's why people who do things like this, prison is a normal thing that happens or whatever case may be. It's a part of man's feedback loop or whatever for what you did or whatever. But like how we talked about on previous videos, we're dealing with Carl Jung, a causal connections and things like that. Not always the A plus B equals C or whatever case may be. You have various layers of a causal circumstances that may make things happen or whatever case may be. You see what I'm saying? Typically, when a person is trying to let's say we're gonna do case studies as we go through this, and when we talk about people, especially let's say like serial killers and people of that nature, you're dealing with people who are trying to unalive a shadow aspect of themselves. It's some shadow aspect of themselves that they're projecting on the victim or whatever case may be. So we'll get into some of this. um if you like what you've been hearing, like and subscribe. You see what I'm saying? Hit your notification bell, so if the algorithm cheat me, you feel me? We underdogs over here, man. You know what I'm saying? Underdogs discussing some of this hot fire, you feel me? So the bioetheric engineering of homicide, a quantum etheric analysis of traumatic decoupling and the resonant implication. So let's get into that. Foundational synthesis, the quantum etheric model of consciousness, the energetic mechanics of homicide must be analyzed through a framework that supersedes purely materialistic three-dimensional causality. A plus B equals C. So we're not dealing with the A plus B equals C aspect of it. That's the obvious. You see what I'm saying? The obvious, gross, um, um, I don't know, anybody can see type deal. We're dealing with the more subtle nuances of this situation so we can get a better understanding of it. This report utilizes a synthesized model drawing on the electric soul concept. You see what I'm saying? Remember we were talking about that. Pascal Beverly Randolph, way back in the day, early 1800s, said that the soul was electrical or whatever. We're dealing with Tesla's physics. Tesla don't believe in electrons and particles and little BBs going from place to place or whatever. He believes in fields and stuff like that. Faster than light travel. His physics is inspired by the physics of Swami Vivekananda, which is inspired by Vedic metaphysics. So it corresponds more strongly with this esoteric stuff. So we can't be using words like pseudo and all that stuff like that. We've gotten away from all the juvenile arguments that we get into when we're using the wrong physics and we blaming other people because we're using the wrong physics. We're using Einstein physics, where instantaneous action at a distance is called spooky. But when we get into more applicable physics like Tesla's physics, instantaneous action at a distance is a regular thing. So let's move along. The principles of Carl Jung's acausal connections. So basically, it doesn't have to be a plus B equals C. I'm hungry. I went in the fridge and got 2 slices of bread, some peanut butter, some whatever, tuna, whatever I make, or whatever, ate the sandwich or whatever, and I'm no longer hungry. A plus B equals C. No, I thought about Sarah and she called me. Acausal connections. So that's what we've been getting into. So we're dealing with a feedback loop. Trauma, um, trauma manifested sicknesses in the body, a la Dolores Cannon. The language of situations, unresolved trauma and things that we're doing or whatever case may be, manifests as difficult situations and circumstances in the body and stuff like that. How we've been talking about for the past 6 years or so, the language of situations. You see what I'm saying? How the blueprint, as it were, does not communicate in human language. It communicates with situations, circumstances, and things of that nature. So, how we talked about with addiction. If you feel like whatever you feel like you deserve, you're gonna attract somebody in your life to give you what you feel like you deserve, whether that be a bouquet of roses or a boot in the neck. You see what I'm saying? So that is kind of what we're dealing with. The feedback loop. Sacrifices in ancient religions were inputs into the feedback loop. We're dealing with religious systems as technology to manage the feedback loop. That's kind of how we coming in this. So we got bodies and bodies of work of playlist after playlist, video after video, kind of fleshing this out from the simplest down to the smallest particle down up into the whole societies and everything like that. So we been building this out for the last couple months. So you should be, if you don't know what I'm talking about, that means you just need to go back to a previous video. You see what I'm saying? And dive in. So that was my in video rant. So axiomatic framework, defining the bioetheric field and the electric soul. The physical body is axiomatically modeled as a biological capacitor, a containment system for a higher dimensional consciousness field known as the electric soul. Now what we said that we liken the soul to like, let's say you backing up all your information on the server, and then you reckon your iPhone every week for 6 months or whatever case may be, and you keep getting new iPhones. Now we know that's gonna cost an arm and a leg, but on hypothetical or whatever, as long as the information is backed up on the server or whatever case may be, you won't miss a beat. You just lose a lot of money, but you won't miss a beat. You see what I'm saying? As far as the information on your phone, that's what we're liking the soul and the transmigration of souls or whatever case may be. Dealing with the soul electrically, we're dealing with the soul as if it is a level of electrical energy on another phase. Phase meaning Aries, Taurus, um, Gemini, Cancer, and everything like that as hypothetical phases. Transmission in a car, phases, different phases of the energy. What we talking about? It's on a phase that does not interact directly. We can't touch the soul. Its locus is non-physical. Okay, so a concept deeply rooted in the work of Robert Becker. So this is the bibliography for my non-believers and Pascal Beverly Randolph. So this is just satisfying my non-believers. So, you know what I'm saying? You gotta like what I'm saying, but we just ask that you respect it and respect the bibliography and the research has been laid down Can you dig that? So yeah, the functional health and conscious state of this system correlates directly with psychophysiological coherence, representing the harmonious synchronization of vital systems, particularly the heart-brain axis. Optimal system function is defined by high coherence. Instability or trauma is defined by low coherence. Okay, optimal system function is defined by high coherence. Instability or trauma is defined by low coherence. Death in this model is the catastrophic failure of the biological capacitor. The body fails. The battery fails, which forces the electric soul to rapidly decouple, forces the field to rapidly decouple, and everything like that. We said it's electrical how we dealing with it, because how they talk about meridians and channels and nadis and stuff like that in traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine and everything like that. Those are the junctures of the fascia. The fascia is piezoelectric. Stress is translated into an electrical frequency or whatever through this third nervous system that Robert Becker is talking about. It gets all the way down to the DNA level. I think we talked about that on numerous videos. Like we said on a previous video, do the autopsy on the bodies of work and the other videos that we put down. Okay, so in contrast, the natural process of death, often evidenced by phenomena such as a terminal lucidity or the rally, indicate a potential neurophysiological surge that facilitates an integrated, highly coherent transit or exit, right? There's precursors to the person dying or whatever case may be, just similar to how we were talking about in Tibetan Buddhism, how they have Bardo yoga, where they do certain practices or whatever case may be to prepare them to transition so they'll have a clearer transmission. They're likening the death of the person to a broadcast. They're broadcasting out. They're leaving. They're decoupling from the semiconductor capacitor or battery of the body, as it were. Homicide fundamentally prevents this optional integrated decoupling through kinetic and energetic interruption. Again, similar to what the Palero is doing. You're interrupting the death process. This person is not dying of natural causes. You're interrupting the process of death, right? Okay, kinetic and energetic interruption, maximizing turbulence and energetic fragmentation. The operational medium for this consciousness is theorized as a bioetheric feedback loop, which can be modeled using principles derived from Tesla's non-Hertzian, meaning faster than the speed of light, um, longitudinal scalar field. This scalar field acts as the quantum informational nexus that supports and links all individual conscious fields. We've talked about this through numerous different lenses. Jacobo Grinberg was one of the more interesting ones when he talks about, he likened the ether as a lattice that all information is on and everything like that. The synergistic field is what he called it. This non-Hertzian substrate is the proposed mechanism responsible for the stable, enduring, low-frequency imprints left by trauma. This non-Hertzian substrate, the ether, the lattice, whatever you want to call it, is the proposed mechanism responsible for stable, enduring, low-frequency imprints left by trauma. So the trauma that's experienced by this person when they pass and the process of their natural death is interrupted, it's imprinted here. Okay, just like how we talked about on previous videos, go back into the video where we talk about melanin in the human biofield. We talk about we talk about the lady Eileen Day McCusey and how she was dealing with the human biofield and stuff like that. She talks about she would take the tuning forks or whatever, and she would be able to go through the various parts of the person's human biofield, and she would be able to pick up distortions from various different times in that person's life or whatever. The trauma of that person's life, the memories are stored in the aura, just like how we call the ether akasha. The akashic records is the information in that. We call we say that the unconscious, the collective unconscious of humanity is a portion of the information or energy stored in the ether, right? Okay, so the foundation of the residual energy field, REF, this residual field that stays with the body after the larger field has decoupled. Okay, this ties into like some of the stuff we read about in the Book of the Dead and stuff like that. The Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, they talk about the different divisions of the person's spiritual anatomy after they're deceased. Okay, so let's get into it. The bioetheric feedback loop and acausal connections. The bioetheric feedback loop is the dynamic governor of a consciousness system, coherence, functioning as a homeostasis. Because then we liken homeostasis and the principle of ma'at, balance, all that. We liken all that similarly together, or karmic mechanism that attempts to achieve and maintain energetic equilibrium. The bioetheric feedback loop continually records and responds to energetic debt and imbalance, often described in esoteric literature as a karmic trail requiring significant compensation. Okay, so let's get into the homicide aspect of it. Homicide is an extreme shared energetic trauma. So it's not just something that you're doing to somebody else. It's something you're going to get some of. You're getting some of that, or whatever case may be. And this ain't like the example that we use with the Aztec priest, or whatever case may be. Let's say like if he's sacrificing people who are willing sacrifices or whatever, that's a high coherence energy. They're willing sacrifices. They have no problem. It's a part of what they believe in or whatever. They're willingly giving themselves up for the sake of the community. That's more coherent energy. It's less blowback from that or whatever. That actually heals the system and offsets the energy of the coercive victims. Okay, so this is a low coherence energy. This person don't want to die. And not only does this person not want to transition, there's a malicious intent on your part. So that's more negative blowback as far as this is concerned. Okay, because it's a difference between um, you accidentally doing this and you doing this intently. So homicide is an extreme shared energetic trauma that linearly and informationally couples non-linear. So it's not A plus B equals C thing, and informationally couples the killer's psyche to the victim's energetic trace. Huh? So it couples the perpetrator's psyche to the victim's energetic trace. This process is governed by Carl Jung's acausal connecting principle, synchronicity, right? The severity of the shared event. The shared event establishes an acausal connection, sustaining the bioetheric feedback loop in the force system, the perpetrator, to continuously interact with and attempt to resolve the severe energetic imbalance. So you're basically creating a rift, the energetic imbalance. So you're going to continuously have some sort of feedback from that, whether it be nightmares, whether it be seeing that person's face. I mean, you have to talk to people who've actually been through that experience or whatever case may be, doing that. And it's a lot of common stuff that you consistently hear from people who've taken a life or whatever case may be, and they run into stuff like this: nightmares, not being able to sleep, all kind of stuff like that or whatever. It's a feedback loop from that shared trauma that they just created or whatever case may be. So a lot of this stuff is talked about in rap music, and saying it's glorified on movies and all this stuff like that or whatever case may be. But the actual mechanics of it are very different. So the engineering of it, it gives away a lot of the nuances or whatever. You basically opening the door for basically a haunting, or not even a haunting, but if not a haunting, like furniture gonna be moving or whatever. But it's at the very least dreams and revisiting that situation, because it's going to be a shared trauma and that person is anchored to you. You see what I'm saying? The persistent vision experienced by the killer, often the victim's face or the moment of death at the tangible manifest are the tangible manifestations of the acausal connection. This is an informational feedback loop projecting the victim's energetic self-image into the killer's conscious or waking state. The visions act as a perpetual informational throughput, preventing the perpetrator from achieving psychological or energetic isolation from the trauma. So, okay, so with this, um, when we were talking about the thing about Paulo, we dealing with, how can I really say it? You may have you know, it may be some kind of blood involved or something like that in the ritualistic disruption of the death process or whatever case may be. But for the most part, this the spirit is bound to the paleto, but he's bound to the paleto through the cauldron. So the cauldron is the bypass. So he's not directly dealing with this. You know what I'm saying? He ain't having nightmares because the disembodied person is bound to the cauldron. There's some sort of system in place because they already knew this was going to happen. They already knew that this was already in mind or whatever. You just went out there and you just heard a rap video, did a drive-by, whatever scenario may be. I'm just giving a hypothetical or whatever case may be with no understanding of any of this. And you bonded that person to you directly. You see what I'm saying? The act of unaliving, particularly when driven by malicious intent, constitutes a form of bioetheric engineering, a focused manipulation of the victim's energetic field to ensure destructive decoupling and spiritual destabilization, or what have you. Now, it's an interesting thing, or whatever the case may be, because I know back in the day they would have something like I don't know, Avengers and stuff like that. Not the comic book Avengers, but people who could avenge the death of someone who died or whatever. That was like legal within the law or whatever. Because you must also remember that we dealing with the blueprint, as it were, is linked to the DNA. This person family gonna feel some type of way, and the person that might exact retribution on you might be from that person's family or whatever case may be. That's a likelihood because the DNA is linked to the energetic blueprint. So that's the thing. Um, Homicide is a as intentional coherence collapse. All right, hold on one second. Yeah. Okay. Homicide is defined as a deliberate, focused psychoenergetic vector of intentional trauma. The presence of a malicious intent, okay, is a critical energetic distinction differentiating homicide from the random kinetic vector of an accidental or criminal negligence. You see what I'm saying? If it's just criminal negligence, somebody might die in the commission of a crime or whatever, but it's not just your intent to go and seek this one person out. An accident, let's say like a vehicular homicide or some sort of automobile accident or whatever, in the event someone passes or whatever from that person did not get in a car, get on the road with the intention of taking somebody out. So the component of and it's gonna reflect in the charge or whatever case may be as far as the legal system, but it wasn't it was not malum in se, evil in itself. It wasn't that person going out saying I'm finna get this person or whatever case may be. Where the intent to cause death is absent, the analytical framework posits that malicious intent actively modulates the bioetheric feedback. Okay, so malicious intent adds to the negative feedback that you're going to get. The killer's will acts as a focused energetic spike. Um, it adds to the intensity or the voltage of the situation, forcing the victim's system into a specific low coherence. Low coherence. They don't want to go. They're not trying to get up out of here. They're not trying to check up out of here, but you got malicious intent. You determined to make them do something that they don't want to do, even on an energetic level, even on a level of leaving here. High stress signature that maximizes fragmentation, right? This directed modulation prevents the consciousness from achieving the structural integrity necessary for a clean, integrated transmigration. You're interrupting the natural death process. You see what I'm saying? Similar to what the Paleto was doing, but in that sense, they have a structured system or whatever case may be. You don't have no structured system. You just did something, released a whole lot of energy or whatever case may be, and created a trauma bond with a disembodied entity, basically. This And you ain't giving it no sacrifices. You ain't doing nothing that the Paletto is doing to maintain this bond or whatever the case may be, or to dampen the aggression of this transgression, if as it were. This targeted energetic disruption finds a powerful theoretical analogy in the necromantic concepts of Palo and Vodun. In similar esoteric traditions, these systems often feature techniques designed to consciously engineer spiritual stasis or binding. Consciously engineer the spiritual stasis or binding. The Homicide Act, regardless of the killer's spiritual awareness, achieves the same functional outcome, ensuring the victim's consciousness is unable to fully integrate and decouple. So you interrupting the death process for this person. Okay, resulting in a state of homeless dead or bumble. The trauma-induced fragmentation leaves critical pieces of the energetic essence, the soul fragments, tied to the physical dimension and susceptible to the energetic anchoring or manipulation. Like we said on previous videos, another reason why we even kind of going into some of this, we see the hardships or the potential dangers that the deceased person may have to face once they pass on. You see what I'm saying? So, I wishing them well, our attending their funeral, giving them my thoughts and prayers and stuff like that. That's a significant thing, even though it may not seem like much. Inhibiting the necessary energetic retrieval by the primary consciousness field to restore sovereignty. So, just like in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and everything like that, apparently the soul fragments or the constitution of the field that leaves the individual fragments into different parts or whatever case may be, or whatever it already fragments or whatever case may be. And this is further fragmentation, the energetic feedback loop between the perpetrator and the victim. I'm saying perpetrator because I'm on YouTube and you know how it go. I don't even know if this may be demonetized or however it may go, because I'm talking about you know what I'm talking about. But we're talking about it in a respectful type of way. um and like I say, all of this is for informational purposes. Just want to kind of like flesh out what this is that people actually doing. And go back to the video we did about honoring the consequences of not honoring self, getting fired. You see what I'm saying? That's another thing or whatever. A lot of times people that unalive people, they get unalive themselves or whatever case may be. You see what I'm saying? Okay, the intense shared trauma field generated by the homicide creates an acausal nexus. An acausal nexus. So it's not A plus B equals C. It's an acausal nexus, instantly forming the bioetheric feedback loop. The violent and intentional extraction of the victim's consciousness results in a severe energetic debt and imbalance. The karmic tale that the bioetheric feedback loop is designed to correct. So nature is designed to correct itself. So when you create an imbalance like this, or some sort of debt, so to speak, or whatever, nature is correcting itself. Remember, karma ain't the punishment of God. Karma is not the punishment of God. It's the feedback loop. It's the blueprint trying to correct itself. It's trying to bring you closer to perfection. But but you just did some heinous stuff or whatever. So it got to tighten you up real quick. Okay. So the acausal loop sustains the victim's fragmented state, simultaneously preventing the killer's psychological healing. Dissociation is a psychological defense mechanism, like multiple personality or whatever, viewing the person, like how we talked about in the law and stuff like that. When you write somebody into the law as less than a person or whatever case may be, it makes it easier to mistreat them. The law modulates the karmic feedback. So dissociation is a psychological defense mechanism, which where a suspect attempts to reject an overwhelming or hideous reality. The homicide act is profoundly traumatic for the killer, who often attempts to dissociate from the enormity of the event. However, the bioetheric feedback loop acts as a dissociative amplifier, right? Dissociative amplifier. It continually projects the reality, the victim's energetic face, keeps continuously seeing the victim's face or whatever case may be, back into the killer's consciousness, preventing integration, perpetuating the psychoenergetic debt. Constantly reminded of the debt and locking the killer into a perpetual state of traumatic reenactment. You constantly haunted by this person that you took out of here, or you interrupted their death process. So you're a part of it's difficult for them to find peace with you walking around here living life or whatever, and you took them up out of here and you um, interrupted their death process. So not only did you disrupt their family, because there may be some kind of karmic blowback from the group blueprint or whatever, taking one of its own up out of here or whatever case may be, but you disrupted this individual's transition or transmission up out of here or whatever case may be. So they're bound to you. You see what I'm saying? Similar to the Palero and the Ngenga. or the infumbi in the Nginga. The energetic trauma, fragmentation, and the decoupling process, the quality and the duration of the trauma directly dictate the post-mortem integrity of the consciousness field and the nature of the spirit's transition. The quality and duration of the trauma directly dictate the post-mortem integration of the consciousness field and the nature of the spirit's transition. Wow. Okay. So the duration of the trauma, whether they die a quick and painless death, or whether it's a slow, tortured experience, or whatever case may be, like how they tortured people in the Middle Ages and stuff like that. Okay. Versus, you see what I'm saying? We see all those movies and stuff like that where somebody's, Braveheart or somebody like that. Somebody's dying on the battlefield or whatever the case may be, and dude's like, go on, do it, go on, take me up out of here. And he, unalives his homeboy or whatever, just to give him some dignity so he won't suffer and stuff like that. It's an engineering and a science behind it. What's actually happening there. So let's get into that. The traumatic disintegration of consciousness, severe, intentional, human caused trauma is highly correlated with dissociation and fragmentation of memory and self, right? Human caused trauma is highly correlated with dissociation and the fragmentation of memory and self. In the Bio-Aetheric model, this is understood as a literal splitting or fragmentation of the soul, energetic essence. The victim's consciousness utilizes psychic numbing to block the overwhelming, painful sensation of being reduced to nothing. Wow. Okay. This is the victim now. While the defense offers temporary psychological shelter, it imposes an energetic barrier, inhibiting the consciousness' ability to fully integrate the experience and execute a clean, unitary decoupling from the physical capacity. So being tortured or whatever case may be, it takes all they got to just sustain the torture and stuff like that. And when they finally die, it fragments that it fragments their personality in different parts of themselves. Decoupling dynamics, quick, painless versus slow torture. The manner of death induces differential mechanics to the decoupling process, with distinct implications for the integrity of the electric soul and the resulting energetic trace. Okay, let's see, quick and painless. So the soul conscious integrity, quick and painless, high integrity. So it's maintaining its wholeness together. Rapid, violent ejection. It can leave, but it's still whole. When that soldier on the battlefield, his buddy is mortally wounded and he's just suffering and bleeding. He's like, "Hey man, take me up out of my misery," and stuff like that. He does that, and high integrity, rapid, violent ejection or whatever. He can still leave in one piece. He's not fragmented. Okay, slow torture, prolonged suffering, systematic fragmentation, dissociative trauma. So they experiencing trauma before they transition, and they're unable to transition properly. Now, this doesn't even factor in other things like being inside of a metal building, being inside of different structures and stuff like that. How we talked about the geobiological aspect of the transition and everything like that. This doesn't even factor in all that. This is just the nature of the unaliving. Decoupling rate extremely rapid. This is for the person who dies quick and painless. Extremely rapid, high kinetic velocity. Okay, so the slow torture, delay, forced, inhibited violation of a biological time. So you're violating that person's time, which is causing further negative feedback. Post-mortem state. So after they pass on, quick, painless homicide. So this is potential for clean transmigration or shocked stasis, bumbo. So it's a toss up. Quick and painless is a toss up. It's a potential clean transmigration, or they could potentially still be stuck here, depending on I guess other factors. High likelihood of fragmented or bound state, engineered stasis. Okay, the slow tortured person or whatever case may be, due to the fact that they're going to be so fragmented by the time they make their actual transition, and the transition ain't clean, they're probably going to be stuck here. They're probably going to be bound here because of that trauma and those unresolved issues and everything like that. So the residual energy field imprint and signature, focus, high intense, high frequency kinetic snapshot. That's the quick and painless. Okay. The slow torture, diffuse, pervasive, low frequency, prolonged stress trace. Okay. So in quick, Painless death. The system experiences extreme shock. The speed of the event forces a rapid, albeit violent, ejection. The integrity of the electric soul is preserved due to the lack of time for systematic fragmentation, or whatever case may be. So it doesn't get fragmented. It has a chance to make a decent transition as opposed to being bound here and stuck here. Um, the victim is shocked into stasis, bumbo, but is energetically whole. So they may still be shocked into being stuck here or whatever, but they're not as fragmented as the other individual who's gonna have a slow and painful situation. In contrast, slow torture or prolonged suffering is the energetic antithesis. It represents a violation of biological time, designed to methodically shatter the spiritual and psychological integrity of the subject. So this is very similar. In death, torture is like a similar to how it's like a post-mortem MK Ultra type deal. You see what I'm saying? This prolonged low coherent stress causes maximal fragmentation, right? As fragmented as they can become. The consciousness actively fragments and scatters its pieces across the emotional and physical environment before the final death, leading to a profound inhibition of the natural transmigration process and high potential for energetic binding to lower dimensions. So this is what you get when you get the movies like The Ring, when you get the movies like with these disembodied spirits haunting places and stuff like that. That fragmentation. When you get when you get into the Ouija board, I think we got a video coming out about that. You get into the whole thing with the Ouija board or whatever. The reason why it's so ill is because you're touching the implement that's doing the divination. You see what I'm saying? You're touching the little spinner thing, not the spinner, but you know what I'm saying. The little tab thing that you're doing the reading the letters with, and it's multiple people doing that. So if everybody ain't just a freaking Buddhist monk or whatever case may be, the shadow aspects of their personality have an ability to surface and combine with the shadow aspects of other people. So y'all got some collective shadow aspect that's manifesting through this divination thing or whatever case may be. So whereas me or you may have a shadow aspect that we may be able to keep under control or whatever, and it may just manifest as some sort of pattern that we can kind of manage. Whereas putting multiple ones of us together, coming up with that collective shadow and manifesting it through that board, that's a different kind of ball game. Okay, so let's see, the acausal feedback loop, killer victim resonance, the ongoing resonance between the I keep saying, I know I'm being demonetized, so I don't care, man. We gotta kind of like go through stuff like this to kind of understand. So you know what I'm saying. So people understand the gravity of what they're doing. You see what I'm saying, out here in the world and stuff like that, and hopefully it'll deter a lot of my I don't know, my younger people from doing certain things or whatever just because it's made popular on a video or something like that. You know what I'm saying? The ongoing resonance between the perpetrator and the victim is a direct consequence of the sustained acausal connection established by the violent act. Okay, it's an acausal connection. Okay, so visual persistence, the victim's energetic self-image, the perpetrator persistent vision of the victim is the continual informational throughput of the acausal bioetheric feedback loop. It is a sustained, prolonged image of the victim's energetic self, which was locked into the killer psyche at the moment of highest psychoenergetic resonance. From a Jungian archetypal perspective, the killer's vision is not a simple memory, but a profound encounter with the unintegrated shadow, right? So this person that they unalived is becomes a manifestation of their shadow or a projection of their shadow. The victim often represents an externalized, unintegrated archetype. The existence of a facial similarity linkage in serial killings provides a physical correlate suggesting the killers unconsciously seek a specific energetic resonance embedded in their own shadow material. The murder, therefore, is an attempt to violently integrate or destroy this archetype. But the bioetheric feedback loop prevents closure. You can't destroy it, locking the catastrophic energetic act into the killer's waking dream reality. Remember, we talked about doing waking dream interpretations because you're operating with the same subconscious mind and subconscious imagery and archetypes, whether you're dreaming or you're awake. It's just more clear when you're dreaming because you don't have to worry about tangible reality. So residual energy field and the psychometric imprinting. The residual energy field is a low frequency, stable energetic trace that lingers with the physical body after the larger consciousness field has decoupled. Remember, we said the field decouples from the battery, and then there's a residual field that lingers or whatever. When we were talking about necromancy, we were talking about the person who does that. Um, that would be what they're operating off of, the residual field. This field, which can be perceived through psychometry, is the enduring soul of a seriously suffering person and constitutes the psychometric trace that imprints the location where they are, where the thing occurs. So their residual field, and the trauma and the nature of the expulsion of the energy or whatever, that'll be imprinted in some way on the location where the thing happens at. The imprint mechanism, supported by the Tesla physics model, suggests that the intense trauma generates a high amplitude, non-Hertzian broadcast faster than the speed of light, right? Non-Hertzian. Remember, because when we talk about Einstein's physics, all this is pseudo with Einstein's physics, non-believer. All this is pseudo when it comes to Einstein's physics. True and living, we know, not the mentally dead, the true and living, we know that in another framework of physics, just that easy, we can flip it to Tesla's physics, we can flip it to John Keely's physics, some other template of physics, and we can see that this non-Hertzian, faster than the speed of light stuff is very possible, very doable, and very common in a lot of different actions, as far as how the body functions, as far as how a lot of different phenomena actually work. This broadcast causes the scalar field matrix of the immediate environment and the physical body to record the event. Psychophysiological signature. The character of the residual energy field is diagnostic of the trauma duration and quality, how long the person suffered when they passed on, or whatever case may be. The quality of it, was it harsh? How the nature of the fragmentation? A quick, violent death generates a high frequency kinetic spike. Um, Residual energy field correlating to the instantaneous high energy trauma burst. Um, Conversely, prolonged suffering or torture generates a diffuse, low frequency, sustained hum residual energy field. This spectral difference allows psychometry or theoretical scalar field detectors to differentiate the quality and duration of the trauma independent of the traditional forensic evidence. Okay, so post-mortem, we're going to do one or two little case studies and then we're going to be up out of here. Post-mortem resonant implication. Okay, so we got 5 case studies, right? Okay, so the following theoretical case studies illustrate the application of the bioetheric feedback loop, fragmentation, and residual energy field models across different homicide scenarios, right? Case study 1, a quick gunshot execution. The victim's consciousness field experiences a high velocity coherence collapse, while the decoupling is near instantaneous. The violent kinetic force prevents a clean, coherent exit. It prevents them from exiting cleanly because you're still interrupting the death process. You see what I'm saying? The electric soul is violently ejected, resulting in a state of shock, but generally intact because it's quick. So they didn't have the time to fragment. So it's typically quick, but it ejects them violently, so they may still be intact and not fragmented. The perpetrator experiences intense, high amplitude flashbacks, the waking dream, which are high frequency energetic projections, a rapid snapshot of the moment of unaliving. The residual energy field is localized and powerful, characterized by a high frequency kinetic spike at the site of the fatal wound, or whatever case may be. So I know people who do like past life work or whatever. They say a lot of times people have moles and different beauty marks and body indentions or whatever, birthmarks and stuff like that on weird places or whatever. Some people say, by some people's, their methods or whatever, however it may go, they anticipate some of those weird birthmarks and things like that to be maybe potentially having something to do with, you know, how a person might have been unalived in a previous iteration or something like that. So, case study two, prolonged torture and asphyxiation. This scenario involves systematic fragmentation because they're being tortured over time due to prolonged, intentional, low coherent stress, something they don't want to do over a long period of time or whatever, leading to their unaliving. The consciousness fragments extensively before decoupling, often resulting in a bound state. They're bound to this realm. The the perpetrator is subjected to a deep, pervasive haunting. So, okay, so yeah, the level of coherence. This person's doing something, you getting this person to do something that they don't want to do on up until that person leaving here or whatever. And the more they're fragmented, because you're binding yourself to this person um in a negative way. They didn't want to pass on or whatever the case may be. So you're binding yourself to this person who's probably pissed, and then you've tortured them. So you fragmented their psyche in all kind of different directions or whatever the case may be. So this is those crazy hauntings, potentially some of the crazy hauntings that you run into or whatever in some of these stories and stuff like that. Deep, pervasive haunting experiences sustained dread and low frequency loop of victims suffering. The decoupling is delayed, and inhibited due to the violation of biological time. The residual energy field is diffuse and pervasive, characterized by a low frequency pain and despair imprint throughout the entire trauma location. So yeah, so when you get into haunted houses and stuff like that, people who might have been tortured or something like that, these crazy stories, that true crimes and all that good stuff, all those crazy stories that you get into, it taints the energy of that freaking location because all that is imprinted in the location, the suffering of the person and all that. So they're linked to the person that caused the suffering, but it's also linked to the place where it happened. Because remember we talked about in the video about geobiology and stuff like that, people chanting and praying in a church. If you put a church in a certain place and people chant and pray and have spiritual experiences in that location and stuff like that, and have certain ritual practices that exude certain positive levels of energy or whatever the case may be, it can actually heal the surrounding environment, or it can actually offset some of the energy in the surrounding environment. It can potentially change the energy in the surrounding environment, whatever the case may be. Similarly with this, your torture dungeon, however it may go, So criminal negligence, automobile crash fatality. In this scenario, death results from an accidental fragmentation, kinetic shock. While the death is violent, the critical absence of malicious intent, the absence of malicious intent. You didn't go out there and look for the person. You didn't go out there and say, it's up, I'm finna go get such and such. Okay. Focused energetic vector required for bioetheric engineering is missing. Okay. The perpetrator, the negligent party, experiences profound guilt and moral debt, but the analysis predicts no persistent acausal vision. They don't see the face of the dead person because of the simple fact they didn't intentionally go looking for this person with the intention of getting them up out of here, or synchronous projection of the victim's face. The bioetheric feedback loop establishes a karmic debt related to the negligence, but not the targeted pathological connection of intentional homicide, right? So you get something back, some feedback based on the level of negligence, but you're not going to get what a person who intentionally tried to take this person up out of here is going to get, because they have the difference would be the, what do you call it, the um, malicious intent. The residual energy field is a high amplitude kinetic trace, but it lacks the distinct psycho-emotional signature of directed malice. So the fourth one, homicide, suicide. I think I talked about this on a previous video or whatever. In this is like the only scenario where the energy kind of balances out. Um, and it's not, and as you can see by the name, I mean, it's not like I'm not saying that this is a favorable situation or nothing like that, but I'm just saying it is a situation that happens. And again, this is just for energetic purposes or whatever. We're just examining this stuff. I hope all of my audience are mature enough to be able to um view this listen to this information, kind of file it away how it needs to be filed away, and understand that we're examining like what happens when we see these things or whatever the implications of what happened when we see these things. It would deter us away from certain actions like that or whatever the case may be. Um, unless we're trying to defend our life or our loved ones or something like that, because as we can see, the feedback loop is feedback and blowback from just doing this and stuff like that. So yeah, so don't go out and if somebody step on your sneakers, you know what I'm saying, like the cats on the West Coast do. They've evolved it down to catching fades and stuff like that, because their wars were terrible. You see what I'm saying, with a lot of this going on. So um and same thing with the brothers in Chicago and stuff like that. Their wars were terrible. I know a lot of the older brothers or what have you, of the various different organizations or whatever, what have you, nationwide, however it may go, are trying to like steer that away from the more violent iterations of those organizations. You see what I'm saying? I know a lot of that stuff started off. Certain ones started off as community organizations. Some of the older ones started off as community organizations. Later on, as drugs got introduced and stuff like that, guns and things like that got introduced, or whatever case may be, the dynamics started to change. There was more unaliving and stuff like that. I know after a lot of individuals may have gotten incarcerated, they may have seen kind of like the errors in their ways, seeing young cats coming in, following their footsteps and stuff like that, and sought to, I don't know, revise a lot of the um, understanding, adjust the substance of the law, like we talked about in a previous video, where it would be less of this unaliving and more progressive ventures. I think this is kind of like the outcome of that, or whatever case may be, the negative stuff or whatever, all the negative feedback, all the negative blowback, by changing, or making an attempt to kind of like, I don't know, make certain adjustments in certain pathways. um, I think I think in the end it would steer um, the individuals who live certain lifestyles away from certain inevitable consequences or whatever, because it ain't really no consequence, ain't really no outcome to being, you know, so-called gangster, but death or imprisonment. So, this is, like I say, that's my video rant again, but this is, for informational purposes. You know, I know we're talking about you know, a lot of a certain type of subject matter and stuff like that, but it's not to glorify any of that. It's not to kind of like steer anybody toward that. It's so we understand it, so we can kind of like deal with it accordingly. Okay, so homicide, suicide. The death is a result of integrated feedback loop collapse. The killer, by ending their own life, simultaneously terminates the energetic pole required to sustain the bioetheric feedback loop. Now, this is just saying the person ends their own life. Now, that's a whole nother thing. The bioetheric feedback loop, the bioetheric engineering of suicide. We'll probably have to do that one. You see what I'm saying? To kind of like delve into that. And I know these are touchy subjects, sensitive subjects, but I mean, some of this subject matter, when I first started doing it, um, you know, I kind of had one mindset for it. I figured it would be helpful to some people in one way. I know especially a lot of the material that the brother Naju put down, the experiential, that's very helpful. I knew that would be very helpful for some people. But as we bridge it over into some of this information with the bioetheric feedback loop and all that stuff like that, I see it's kind of taking on another dimension or whatever case may be, as we start having these conversations and certain topics. As we discuss them, it kind of gives other nuances to those topics or whatever case may be, and it kind of shows different, um, I don't know, different implications of when people do different things, and it shows kind of like, I don't know, our relationship to our fellow man. You know what I'm saying? Because it's dealing a lot with karma, our relationship with ourselves, our relationship with our fellow man, and stuff like that. So, our relationships with the members of our community and everything like that. A lot of the things that have been done in the past, not knowing a lot of this stuff or whatever case may be. So, yeah, the acausal connection is dissolved instantly. achieving an immediate, albeit violent, equilibrium for the two coupled systems. The victim's spirit is instantaneously released from the energetic binding of the killer's psyche. So the victim is not bound to the killer, at least not physically, on the physical plane at least. Consequently, there is no residual vision. You can't see anything, can't have no vision or whatever of the deceased person's face because he's deceased himself. For any third party or survivor, the residual energy field at the site is a highly complex co-resonant field collapse. Yeah, it's a collapse of two fields because a co-resonant field collapse because they have a shared trauma. Um, there's a shared trauma from the homicide. And that's a whole thing in itself. And then when you get into the suicide, that's where the other part of the field collapses because this deceased person has kind of been bonded with this individual, and then they deceased themselves. So that's a collapse of the whole thing. Um, and we'll probably do one on the bioetheric engineering of suicide and stuff like that because I know a lot of people, certain people struggle with that. You see what I'm saying? As far as that being a thing, with depression and that's accompanied with depression and all that. So it's a lot of little pieces and case studies that we got to do on this Ether Illustrated. I think it may, my intention is to help, or at least give some kind of contrast in some of these conversations. So, um, case number 5, serial killing and targeted victim. This scenario involves repeated pattern fragmentation, right? The serial killer, often targeting victims with subtle facial similarity linkage, is actively selecting for a specific energetic resonance. It's a specific energetic resonance, whether it be blondes, whether it be children, whether it be whatever they're a predator toward, or archetypal ego. The recurring murder is a energetic ritual. It's an energetic ritual for this individual, driven by the bioetheric feedback loop as a sustained, compelling acausal drive. So it's something, some imbalance in principle, as we would say in the experiential, but it's some psychological trauma that this person is not dealing with. So their response to that psychological trauma is not an addiction, how we talked about previously. Remember how we talked about addiction is the physical manifestation of a psycho-spiritual trauma. This manifestation of a psycho-spiritual trauma is them going out and actually unaliving people. So this is something more extreme than what we've been talking about. This would be something like the extreme forms of an addiction. The recurring murder is an energetic ritual. So if a person has the compulsion to do that, because some people listening to all this music and stuff like that, they change the frequency in the music. Some people develop a compulsion to do this or whatever. This is a psycho-spiritual crisis, but it's manifested as some kind of addiction. But the only difference with this addiction is it's one of the worst kind of addictions you can have, because not only are you addicted, you're not addicted to a substance that has its own thing. You're addicted to something, a pattern of behavior that basically it can set you up to be basically haunted or under spiritual attack. You see what I'm saying? So you're gonna be up under a legion of spiritual attack. You see what I'm saying? Um, Compelling acausal drive. The killer sees the victim's face as an evolving composite archetypal figure, a reflection of an unintegrated shadow. The residual energy field left behind across multiple locations exhibits a patterned, repetitive, low-frequency signature, creating an energetic signature chain that psychometric analysis could hypothetically link across disparate crime scenes, right? Okay, so the conclusion in the end. Homicide, in the context of this systematic synthesis, is an intentional coherence collapse event designed to inhibit the victim's natural high coherence decoupling. You see what I'm saying? Leading to spiritual fragmentation and the establishment of a sustained acausal loop, bioetheric feedback loop with the perpetrator. So it's something, again, like how we were talking with Paulo, it's something that interrupts the death process of this individual. And as that person's death process being interrupted, it bonds that person to the person who, if that person has malicious intent and all that stuff like that, various different factors, it could potentially bond that person to the person who unalived them or whatever, and set you up where where the person who has been unalived is pursuing you on an acausal level or whatever that could ultimately lead to your own demise, your own incarceration, your own unaliving or whatever case may be. The analysis suggests that the nature, so a person can, just because a person is unalive, they can still seek revenge on you from beyond the grave. It's basically what this is saying. The analysis suggests that the nature of, and I know that's pseudo when we deal with Einstein physics, but thank God for Nikola Tesla, right? Thank God for Pascal Beverly Randolph. Thank you, you feel me? So we can walk through this thought experiment and kind of get a few nuances in this. Specifically, the degree of fragmentation and frequency spectrum of the trauma is determined by the killer's malicious intent and the duration of the suffering, right? The degree of fragmentation and the frequency spectrum of the trauma is determined by the killer's malicious intent and the duration of the suffering. The characterization of, and it's so funny, not funny, but when you see certain movies, it's several movies that come to mind um, that kind of deal with this. You see what I'm saying? A person, um, it may be a person, a killer in a movie, in a horror movie or something like that, like a haunting themed horror movie or something like that. And they may have been unalived or whatever, like Jason Voorhees or something like that. I know Jason's not a ghost well, in certain iterations of Friday the 13th. He's a little boy or whatever case may be, that he's drowning while the camp counselors are making out and stuff like that. And that entity comes back, you see what I'm saying, to seek revenge at Crystal Lake. And it's a similar thing. It's a similar notion. When you go to different movies and stuff like that, and the fragmentation of a person's personality, all these, I don't know, exotic monsters in these horror films and stuff like that. Sometimes when in some of these stories or whatever, once they actually get to the bottom of the haunting or whatever it may be a little girl or something that was deceased in a traumatic way, or a little kid or something like that or whatever. The original person may be very, very innocent versus the fragmentation that took place. They turned into some kind of crazy savage monster or something like that. You see what I'm saying? Just give an example, just giving a movie like example, so you kind of get the gist of what I'm saying or whatever, or how you can relate that to movies or whatever case may be. The characterization of the residual energy field signature, i.e. the distinction between high frequency kinetic spike from sudden death and a low frequency pervasive hum from prolonged torture, provides a vital framework for an advanced forensic analysis. This framework moves beyond traditional physical evidence to provide the theoretical validation for the principles of psychic investigation and psychometry. The analysis suggests that scalar field detectors capable of sensing these non-Hertzian, faster than the speed of light, low-frequency imprints could offer new intelligence in cold cases by determining the quality of the death trauma. The fundamental resolution for both the living and the deceased lie in the dissolution of the bio-etheric feedback loop. For the perpetrator, this requires the conscious recognition and reconciliation of immense karmic debt. So in other videos, we get into karmic debt and all that stuff like that and the various things that cause it. This is more of an extreme, what we're talking about in this video. For the deceased victim whose consciousness may be fragmented and anchored, the resolution is dependent upon energetic retrieval, the reintegration of the scattered soul fragments, similar to how what we're talking about in the Book of the Dead. Exactly what he's talking about in the Book of the Dead. That's why they spoke like that. Apparently they knew something we didn't. This process is essential for the victim's electric soul to achieve full integration and energetic sovereignty, allowing for a successful and complete transmigration. The continued manifestation of victim's image in the killer's waking dream state is the bio-etheric feedback loop's constant demand for profound reconciliation. It's constantly demanding for it's nature healing itself or trying to heal itself, basically reminding you that you got a debt to pay. You see what I'm saying? So yeah, that's pretty much what I have for today. Just want to kind of go into the bioetheric engineering of homicide to kind of give us an idea of what's actually going on with that. By no means is it meant to glorify that. If anything, it's meant to kind of give us a window into what's happening because as far as in today's time, evil is made to be fair seeming, and this is in life is made to be a little bit more cheaper and stuff like that. So we got music and popular culture that makes things like that just seem like it's like eating a bag of potato chips. But as we can see, it's a lot more involved. It's a lot of energetic bells and whistles that go along with that, as well as how the deceased person can come at you. They don't need a physical body to come at you because you just bound somebody to you based on your malicious intent to get them up out of here. So yeah, we're gonna do a lot more case studies like that on Ether Illustrated. Appreciate y'all for checking in. Peace to the gods, man. I like what y'all been hearing. Like and subscribe, man. Hit that notification bell so you'll be updated anytime we bring another one out. You feel me? Peace to the gods. Yeah.